Trusted Elections Town Hall, you are in the right place. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Jennifer Roberts, former mayor of Charlotte, and I am the co-lead right now for the North Carolina Network for Fair, Safe, and Secure Elections. That is a program of the Carter Center, which is based in Atlanta. And you may know the Carter Center from the work that they've done overseas, monitoring elections. Recently, they were in Venezuela monitoring that election. And they have done that for decades. In 2020, they started looking at the US because of the increased doubt and skepticism and the eroding trust in our election system here in the US. And we are working in this town hall tour to try to bring information from the experts to the citizens all over our state so they can hear from the experts how your ballot is counted, how it's secured, how the lists are maintained, all the accurate information. We know now in this age of AI that there's going to be a lot of misinformation and maybe some fake things out there. And knowing the correct information is going to help you separate that and continue to know where you can vote, how you can vote, and know that it's going to be secure. I want to just mention that I know there are a number of folks with the Surrey County elections who are election workers who are here tonight. They brought sample ballots, they brought absentee request forms, they brought a bunch of great stuff that's out in the lobby. So if you have any questions, I love seeing the sample ballot and see like what order people's names are in. But that's all out there in the lobby. And if you are one of the staff or election workers for Surrey County, can you raise your hand and give you a big hand?
Yeah.
I also want to thank for our statewide tour. We're doing 28 of these in person, one virtual one. The League of Women Voters has been a partner in this, and Veterans for All Voters, who are also working to get accurate information to veterans so they can vote as well. And they've both been partners in this statewide tour. So we thank their partnership. With that, I am going to introduce the moderator for the evening, who is also my co-lead for the North Carolina Network for Fair, Safe, and Secure Elections. We also ran an election commission looking at how our elections are run. I know some of the folks here serve on that commission. Thank you for helping us on that. So Bob Orr is the moderator for tonight. He is an Army veteran. He was on his practice law in Asheville, Raleigh, Yancey County. He gets around. And he served on the North Carolina Court of Appeals for several years, and then was on the North Carolina Supreme Court for about 10 years and continues to practice law and is a North Carolina native. And he has been a great partner and assistant. It's really good to have a lawyer when you're looking at election law, because that's what the foundation of our democracy is based on, is the rule of law. So with that, please join me in welcoming Bob Orr.
Right. Can you tell which one played college volleyball? pretty easy. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a real treat for me over the past several years to work with Jennifer in this project sponsored by the Carter Center. And we're truly appreciative of our panelists and particularly all of you here tonight to come out. And I have a little bit of historical trivia for you to get started. And that is when the election takes place officially on November 5th, this will be the 60th time in the history of this country that the citizens have gone and elected a president of the United States, as well as other federal and state and local officials. So think about that. 60 times in the history of the country, the citizens have come together to exercise their privilege of voting in a democratic election to elect our leaders. And so the common denominator in all of this, in all those 60 elections, is utilizing the right to vote. And I cast my first presidential vote. I was looking at Dwayne's resume, and I'll introduce the panel here in a minute. He slipped under the wire and got to vote as an 18-year-old after they passed the amendment. I, on the other hand, had to be 21. I cast my first presidential vote by absentee while I was in the United States Army. And it was a memorable circumstance, being able, in 1968, to cast that vote. Now, we have an incredibly sophisticated and technical election system here in the 21st century. And today, North Carolina has over 7.6 million registered voters. And in 100 counties from across the state, from Cherokee County on the Tennessee line, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, Dare County, local boards of elections and professionals who staff these local boards are going to be administering the election system here in North Carolina. And tonight you're going to have an opportunity to hear from a group of experts in the North Carolina election sphere. And as Jennifer mentioned, we're doing 28 of these in this election cycle. We did 14, and consistently, what we have found is that we learn something new every time. And we elect judges here. I ran 5 statewide judicial races, so I sort of thought like I knew a lot about elections. Well, let me tell you, I didn't. I have learned so much from these professionals and people who work the elections. And it's not just the boards and the professional staff, but we have thousands of volunteers, your friends and neighbors, Republicans and Democrats, unaffiliated, who come out during the election cycle and work together to make sure that we have fair, safe, and secure elections, which is what we all want. And so with that, I want to take this opportunity to sort of briefly introduce our panel tonight. And we're going to give you, I'll start off by asking some questions, kind of getting things going. But if you have a question, you're just going to raise your hand. I'll let me call on you, and you'll direct your question to one of the panel members, because this is an opportunity for you to get clarification on issues. And I'll digress 1 second. We were in Edenton in 2022, and this lady said, I'm really concerned. I got 14 absentee ballots. And we said, what? And she was really concerned about it. It turns out she had 14 applications for absentee ballots. She only got 1 absentee ballot, but she was confused about it. So this is really an opportunity for clarification for all of us to better understand the really challenging job that the election officials here in our state have. First to my left is Michelle Huff, who is the elections director for Surry County. Michelle has been director since 2019. Prior to that, she was chief judge and worked early voting in the White Plains area of Surry County for 14 years. She has received a number of awards, including the Dogwood Award from the state of North Carolina Attorney General. And she's worked for the city of Atlanta for 26 years. She looks too young to work there. So thank you, Michelle, for being here. To her right is Jimmy Yoakley, who is a Republican member of the Surry County Board of Elections since 2023. He's native to North Carolinian. Spent a lot of time down on the coast, but he has moved to God's country here and away from the water and up here, sort of the mountains. I always think of foothills. He is the founder, president, CEO, and board member of the Wilmington-based Logistics Advantage LLC. He worked for 11 years for the North Carolina State Ports Authority and a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And I believe there's a football game in Chapel Hill. between UNC Charlotte this Saturday. Any predictions?
Maybe we can talk about a wager.
All right, well, yeah, all right, fair enough. Thank you so much. Yeah. To Jimmy's right is Dwayne Carter, who is a Democrat member of the Board of Elections here in Surrey County and chairman. He's been a member of the Board of Elections since 2015 and served as chairman since 2019. As I indicated, Dwayne was in that first group of 18-year-olds who had the benefit of voting thanks to the constitutional amendment passed in 1971. He is a retired contractor for utility companies and cities in North Carolina, and we're delighted to have you here. I asked you if he was the mayor sitting there. It seems you're not running for mayor. To Dwayne's right is Ann Tyndall. Ann is an attorney with Protect Democracy. She's a special counsel with them, working to ensure free, fair, and safe elections, to make sure everyone in the election space is free from any sort of political violence. She's led a number of Protect Democracy's legislative advocacy projects. She's a graduate of UNC Chapel Hill and the University of Texas School of Law. And father lives in Stokes County, so she used this as an excuse to come up and check on dad. So anyway, thank you, Ian, for coming up. And finally, Dr. Stephen Tate, who this is your third one this year. That's right. Steve is on the circuit with us. He's a cybersecurity expert and professor at UNC Greensboro. He joined UNCG in 2017 and served as department head from 2007 to 2019. Before joining UNC Greensboro, he was at the University of North Texas in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. So if you're interested or have questions about cybersecurity, Steve is the resident expert to answer your questions too. So with that, would you give our panel a round of applause? Thank you for coming. Michelle, I'm going to start with you with sort of a basic question. Explain the structure of the election system from the top down to the precinct level. Yeah.
Of course, in all 100 counties in North Carolina, you have Board of Elections, much like we do. Board of Elections members, 2024 are 5 members. That's 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans for each the Board of Elections in all 100 counties. And from there, the election director works for the chairman of the Board of Elections. And then the staff, of course, works for the county. And then in our office, we have 2 elections clerks. We have elections specialists, and then we have our deputy director and director. So that's the full-time staff. And then we have upwards of around 180 poll workers, temporary workers for elections in Surrey County. And from those 180 poll workers, that also includes a MAT team, which is the multi-partisan assistance team that go into nursing homes, facilities, skilled nursing units at the hospitals. So they do the LNA testing. They also perform the sample hand-to-eye audit after each election. So we really do pull from those 180 to cover all parts: election day, early voting, and all that. And I'm happy to say we have quite a few of those members in our audience today. So I will point out, while I have this moment, that 2 in the back, between the 2, we have over 100 years of working in elections, which is those 2 members. Many counties can say that. So, and they both work on opposite sides of the political spectrum, but get along beautifully. So they're a great example of how it can work.
Right, Ann, I'm going to jump over to you. The state board of elections. What's the role of the state? Do we have a state system, a federal system, local system?
We have a state system,
Yeah.
and the state board of elections is the ultimate decision maker in North Carolina elections. We have that board also has 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans right now. And then there is the state elections director who reports to that board and is the sort of final point of authority within the election system. Of course, others in the state play a role. The courts sometimes consider protests. The courts may handle litigation that emerges from an election. But for the most part, it is the election professionals who run elections in the state. And then at the end of the day, for federal elections, the governor announces the decision for the presidential election, and Congress plays its role there. But for almost everyone on the ballot this year, it is your North Carolina elections officials who are running the show.
So just for clarification, and Dwayne, I'll ask you, the political parties appoint two each, and then how does the chairman get determined?
There are 4 board members, and those are 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. The 5th member of the board is appointed by the governor, and that may be a Republican if there is a Republican governor. And he has 100 appointments across the state. If it is a Democrat, then the chairman of the county board of election is a Democrat. And so that 3-2 can move according to who's in power in the government.
Jimmy, if you could talk a little bit about the role of the board and how it interacts both with the state board, but also with your staff here at the local level.
Thank you, Judge. I appreciate the question. The primary focus is on our director and deputy director and team. They are really responsible for managing all the day-to-day, like every board, even the private sector and public sector. Our role is to oversee those functions and make sure that our team are following the processes as they need to, weigh in on budget matters, decipher what the law is with all the functions that the board is involved in, and make sure that we're adhering to the law.
Now, I would just add to that too, a big part of what our board does is they actually do sign off on the poll workers that are recommended by the party, that the both party chairs have submitted to our staff, and so the board does have the final say on the approval of those precinct officials.
So now, for clarification, are the poll workers the 100 and so people that you're bringing in? Is that as opposed to a poll observer?
Correct. Yeah, observers, we get that question a lot. Most people think that observers who are in the precinct are employed by the Board of Elections. They are not. Each candidate can have up to 2 observers, or each party can have up to 2 observers in each precinct, and 1 at large. So you can do the math there on how many observers can be in a precinct. Our smallest precinct happens to be the one we're in downstairs as far as size of precinct. So that can get quite cozy. But yes, they are appointed by the party. And then, of course, an unaffiliated candidate can also have observers. If they're running unaffiliated by petition, they can also have observers in the precinct on election day or at early voting.
And what are the limitations, since we're talking about observers, what are the limitations on what they can do and can't do?
The main thing is they cannot interfere with the election process, with the voting process. They can never stop the voting process. Even if there is a challenge made by an observer, voting continues to carry on while that challenge is taken care of, over to the side. But they cannot photograph the ballot. They cannot videotape the ballot without your permission, or video a voter. Never can have an image of a ballot or see how someone is voting. They cannot impede the traffic of the voters to and from the ballot station or the DS200. They cannot have a conversation with the voter. If they have a question, they can coordinate that with the chief judge to determine how they're going to communicate through the day. But, and they also can now, with the law change, they can speak to any precinct official in the voting enclosure, not just the chief judge. But they will have a name badge on with their party in every precinct. We provide those. We also sent each party chair the videos that the North Carolina State Board of Elections have just produced with, there's 5 videos for how to submit observer names and how the observers need to be trained before they come into the precinct. I think that's a tremendous resource that they've been working on for years. So I'm very glad that that rolled out, and I shared that with the 2 party chairs today. So
Anybody else? Oh, yeah. All right, so I'm gonna pivot now to the security aspect. We're roughly 60 days or so from 62. You got it. 62.
Okay.
1 hour and 12 minutes, 30 seconds. But we're gonna start sending out absentee ballots. From a security standpoint, and I'll just throw this out. Stephen, I'm gonna have you talk about the broader security aspect. But, you know, where are the ballots now? Who prints? Where are they secured? How are they secured? How are the machines secured?
if I could just
Yeah,
speak
sure.
to Surrey County, because in North Carolina, like most other states, every county is a little different. We are in that, we have Ballotar, that is ballot on demand. So we do not order ballots in Surrey County for absentee by mail. We actually print those ourselves. Also, our early voting sites are ballot on demand, which means we're going to print that ballot after you check in. So we're not pre-ordering pre-printed ballots for that process.
See, I've learned something already tonight that I haven't learned in our other meetings. Did you know that, Jennifer? I didn't know that either. Okay, so,
So we're buying blank ballot stock.
yeah.
From Printellect, our vendor, and we're actually printing that. Now, that's just not, you pull up a PDF and you hit print. There's many, many layers of security and checks and balances. Today, for instance, all 4 of them, of the staff, the full-time staff, were in the boardroom putting together 577 packets to go out Friday morning. And in 2020 at this time, we had around 2,100. So 577 seems like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot compared to 2020. But we do that in-house. Each envelope gets a label with the voter's name, the voter's precinct. That ballot has to be matched with the CIV number to that voter, to that address, and we're double checking the ballot style because we have 8 ballot styles here in Surrey County for the 2024 election. So we have 2 or 3 eyes of our full-time staff on every one of those ballots before they get stuffed in that envelope with the instructions. And it's around $2.04 per ballot to send those out.
So you, and that's after you've gotten a request for an absentee ballot.
Correct, and you cannot get a ballot, thank you for that step, you cannot get a ballot in the state unless you request. Now, North Carolina is a no excuse state, so anyone can request a ballot. But you do have to fill out that absentee ballot request form, and Judge Ward mentioned that. You know, if you got 14 ballots, you probably got 14 ballot request forms, not ballots. And you should only ever receive 1 ballot for an absentee ballot request. And those forms must be complete. You know, there's many restrictions with those forms as well as that absentee ballot. If it's hand delivered, it must be by a near relative, or it must be by the voter themselves.
Right. Stephen, from a broader security standpoint, what's your observations on counties where they're actually having somebody else print the ballots and deal with security versus this is?
Well, there's special stock paper they use. This is not something you can just buy off the shelves at Staples or something. And they're very controlled as far as the number that go out and the number that come back in. I don't, from a security standpoint, with that in absentee ballot, that doesn't bother me.
And the coding, of course, the paper, special thermal paper, plus the channel marks all along the edge. We have to be careful when we make the folds, when we're putting those in the mail. So yeah, it's definitely not the typical Staples paper.
If I may add,
Yeah.
from a board perspective standpoint, the other view is the goal is that's a lower cost to do it the way we do it. And our director has checked out this process thoroughly, informed the board as to what the advantages are and disadvantages are. And we're confident as a board that it's the fiscally right thing to do for our citizens, is to achieve what we need to achieve from an election process standpoint, but at the lowest cost possible.
So, Dwayne, if you and Jimmy would talk about, what's the board's role in dealing with absentee ballots? So y'all count them, how are they, so they're sent out, we assume they get back in via mail or maybe somebody.
Yeah,
After they come back in, we have, of course, absentee board meetings starting October 1st. And we will have weekly, the batch of absentees that have been sent back in. We will look for any deficiencies. And of course, the staff will look whenever they're first received, that everything is in a proper place, signature, the photo ID portion is there, and then we make the judgment what we allow to be counted and what has to go back to the voter, or more a informational request back to the voter for something that is deficient. All the boxes have to be filled out, and the photo ID has to be in there unless they're applying for an exemption. We look and listen to what that exemption is, and then we make our call between the full board members to whether or not we allow it.
We really have a solid check and balance system, I feel like. But again, when I look at it from a business principle standpoint, it's something that you would feel good about in running and operating your business. Checks and balances. Our director and our team go through those absentee ballots first, as our chairman outlined. Then we as the board are putting another pair of eyes. Every board member, we pass those absentee ballots around, make sure that we have all 5 set of eyes on those absentee ballots to make sure that what our director and our team have on the vote is exactly what we're seeing. So,
And so if you find a problem, somebody didn't put their photo ID copy in, or they only used one witness, what's the process at that point?
There's certain instances where you do have to reissue a ballot. And there's instances where you can cure that ballot with a cure application. It's just according to what the situation is. If it is a witness signature that's missing, then you're gonna have to reissue that ballot. If it's a voter signature missing, then you can cure it with a cure process by having that voter sign a letter that is then attached to that ballot that the board would look at and determine if that would count.
And I understand there have been some legal changes on absentee ballot process that the legislature has passed. Can you explain to folks how that?
Sure, that's right. A couple that really, bear on both how you would cast an absentee ballot and how these folks would count it. The first is, North Carolina used to allow sort of what was thought as a safe harbor for postmarked ballots. If it used to be the case that if you put your ballot in the mail before election day, but for some reason, maybe there's a flood somewhere, maybe a truck got lost, your ballot didn't make it by election day. There were 3 days afterwards in which your ballot would be counted. That is no longer the law. The ballot has to be received on election day. There are a handful of exceptions for federal law, where you have people serving overseas, there may be an exception, but for most of us, your ballot has to be in and received by election day. We also know that voter ID is being implemented, we'll have a voter ID component to absentee voting as well, which is referenced. And you either have to submit a copy of your voter ID or an excuse form when you're submitting an absentee ballot, as well as when you show up at the polls, when you show up.
And that deadline is 7:30, close of polls on election day for that absentee ballot to be back in.
Is there a way to track your absentee ballot, whether it's been received or not?
Yes, ballot tracks. You can track your ballot on ballot tracks, and that's through the state board's website. As well, you can request your ballot through the portal. That's another way to request. If you don't want to fill out a form and mail it into us, you can do it through the portal.
For those of us that are young tech types, explain the portal and the ballot track.
Well, with the portal, it's just, it's an online portal where you can fill everything out and submit it, and it goes right to us. It would be there like the next morning for us to review, like we review all of them that come in. That's just a different way for you to request your ballot. And then ballot tracks, you're literally just tracking that ballot. You log in, set up your account. You can see where that ballot, what stage the process is in, all the way through the steps, where your ballot is.
Okay, so if you went on that the day before the election and it had not been received, what are your options? You can't track the postal system down.
Correct.
Say, where's my ballot? I mean, what does the voter do?
At that point, we would encourage the voter to vote in person on election day. If, of course, the request period is over at that point,
Right.
Because the request period ends October the 29th for this election. Unless you can issue an absentee ballot by a medical emergency on election day.
And there may be a question about this. All right, so I voted by absentee, I put it in the mail, day before the election, it hasn't been received. And I go and vote on election day in person.
Mhm.
And then my ballot shows up before the deadline.
Mhm.
Do I get to vote twice, or what's the safeguards to keep that from happening?
Anybody?
Yeah. Who was it? Jimmy, you look like you had.
Well, I've learned an awful lot in the last year and a half.
Yeah.
And particularly from the people that have done this and our director. But if somebody would come in and vote in person after requesting and filling out an absentee ballot, then once that in-person vote is cast, that absentee ballot is dead in the water. It's as if it didn't exist. So there are safeguards in place within the system. We can see if an absentee ballot does come in after the fact, we can recognize it easily enough, make sure it doesn't get counted when it comes to the board. That ballot is spoiled, as the term is used, and the in-person vote is counted.
This is one of the many safeguards that we want.
One of many.
Yeah.
And then if we did have an instance where someone we see did vote twice, we have had that in actually 2022. The person did, when we had the voter challenge, they did not realize that they had voted the first day of early voting curbside. That was 19 days earlier. So they said, we thought that was a different election, we could vote again. So we did have to adjust those totals because of course only one vote can count, and so that has happened and that challenge was successful. But we are only going to count whichever the voter administers first. And so if that absentee ballot did come back voting, it's going to show that person had already voted and that absentee ballot would not be voted.
And just to give you another good example of safeguard, in the last election, we had a family member bring in an absentee ballot for their mother. And unfortunately, in the clear view of our team, they witnessed, or at least saw him sign her name. Okay, so,
And vote for that.
and vote her out, and that's against the law. And so, our team called it. Our director and deputy director brought it to our attention in our board meeting. We addressed it, and we took the action with the leadership of our chairman to issue a voter challenge and to call that person before our quasi judicial body to make a legal decision. They didn't show, and so that ballot was not counted.
There's one thing I want to get a little more information on, because I think it's pretty unique, and that's the MAT program. Dwayne, do you want to talk about that, or you want to punt it over here?
That team,
Yeah, the MAT thing. Yeah, because
everyone that is registered has, of course, the right to vote. That person may be in a nursing home, a hospital, incapacitated, where that they need to have an absentee ballot. They may not have family close. And so a bipartisan team that is appointed by the bipartisan board is able to go in for anyone that has in any of these facilities said, I want to vote. I want to vote absentee. This bipartisan team will go in and have the person fill out the application for an absentee ballot and witness their signature. And then it comes in for a absentee ballot to be sent to them. And they can vote that, of course, themselves with a witness or a notary. And it would need also a photo ID. And they would need to make provisions for that or file for an exception. And then that absentee is set in. So every person that wants to vote that is registered can vote and not incapacitated by some means that they can't get to a post office, they can't come to the county seat and apply. So provisions are made with this multi-partisan team.
And also, that multi-partisan team cannot be in possession of a ballot. That ballot must be mailed just like every other absentee ballot. It must be mailed to the facility. The law did change for this period, and that a person or the team, the multi-partisan assistance team, can now bring the voted ballot back to the County Board of Elections if that voter asks them to. Otherwise, that facility is going to mail that ballot back to us. So the law has changed a little bit there, and the jury's still out. We don't know how that'll be. I keep looking at Cheryl. She's been on our MAT team for forever. So she's already served last week, and we've got more coming in. So, and I'll just touch on this too. In 2020, it was quite an exception. There were many instances where our poll workers were the only people who could access those voters. Their family could not even access them because of the COVID restrictions. So that was a very important period. And we actually served 2 homes during COVID. We went into 2 homes. That is not allowed in the law anymore, but during COVID, we actually went to 2 homes.
Right.
Something very unusual in our primary that I don't think happens very often in the state, but we had a request from our county jail that we had a registered voter that was incarcerated, that had not been convicted yet of a crime, that wanted to vote. We sent a the MAT team to the county jail for the person to fill out the application, sign it before them, and bring it back in so that person could be mailed an absentee ballot. That person had the right to vote, incarcerated or not being a felon, convicted felon. That was a first for me.
And that's when the law was that they could vote. The law does not state that now.
And again, if folks have questions, way back here. Yes, sir. Sure, yeah.
Joe Zalesnik, Mount Airy resident. Along the lines of vote by mail, absentee ballot. I guess this question is for Ann. You have to have 2 witnesses or a notary. And you have to pay for postage to return that ballot. When the Board of Elections gets that ballot, they're verifying the identity of that voter. So why does a mail-in ballot voter have to go through those issues with finding 2 witnesses or a notary? And I know the notary cannot charge the voter, when the Board of Elections is verifying that identification with driver's license, photo ID, or something like that. Is that a legislative issue or is that State Board of Elections issue?
It's a legislative issue.
All right, so we need to reform that. I don't want to tell you what state I came from, but there was, again, no excuse absentee ballot, no signatures for witnesses, and postage was paid. Same thing, Board of Elections verifies that voter. So, to me, that's an additional burden. And I don't know if you agree with that or not, and return postage should be paid. Because if you're in a nursing home and you don't have any money, is the nursing home going to pay the postage? Or is it going to sit in the office? Oh, we don't have stamps.
There are a lot of burdens on folks that have come out of these laws, but they also, we are here to talk about how secure our elections are and our checks and balances.
And I think, Joe, too, not knowing what the rules were with absentee by mail in the state you're from, but they might possibly verify signatures to where North Carolina does not compare signatures for absentee by mail. So that might be a layer of security that they have that maybe we don't, so therefore we have the witnesses and the notary. I'm not sure, but that could be possible. So it is different in each state.
Let me pivot a minute quickly to early voting, which is something that wasn't around when I first started. How does it work in Surrey County? And is there anything that people need to know?
You want to ask your question, then I'll ask mine.
All right.
You go ahead.
Yeah, so you want to explain the early voting
Sure.
process?
And the early voting period is set by General Assembly. And the only role that the local boards of election have is it's a very small window that we actually can play with that schedule. And the window we can play with is, are we going to be open on Saturdays? And how late we are going to be open in the evenings. Our board, they vote on this for every election. And for us, it is a 15-day period because we're only going to do the one Saturday that is required by law, November the 2nd. And that is from 8 to 3. Again, that's set in statute. But our board takes the data that we give them after each election with basically a cost per vote. That's a very hard number to get, and you can skew numbers how you want sometimes, but this is just raw data, cost per vote. And then that plays into their determination of how many sites that we're going to have in Surrey County and the length of days and Saturdays that we're going to be open. And for this election, the board voted for 3 sites unanimous, and that's another thing. There's very few votes that our board must take that are unanimous, but the early voting plan is one. Our board, all 5 members have to be in agreement. If not, if there's just one that is not in agreement, then that goes to the State Board of Elections, and the State Board then will determine that schedule and how many sites are open for that county.
And the early voting dates are on the table
I have
outside.
it in a flyer for you to just grab as you go home.
Absolutely. A quick anecdote about the stamp, and mailing it. We were in Charlotte and the election director said that his daughter, who's 28, was asked him where she should buy stamps, because she didn't know. And he said, get them where I get them, from your mother's purse. Anyway, I had to share that one. So my question is kind of a cyber and security question. I know you have voter rolls and the list, et cetera, that's online somewhere. What prevents somebody from making up a persona, hacking into the system, creating a citizen, and then impersonating them and going and voting because, they got into the system and they created their own, voter name and role in the system? What's to prevent that from happening?
Well, there are a lot of security safeguards that are put on the systems that manage the voter rolls. There are a couple of things to know in particular. Every one of those is verified against external databases, like security databases, databases. So it's not just accepted as a name, it's registered. There were two things I was going to say.
How hard is it to hack into the voter rolls? Is that maintained online or?
It is maintained online, but there are special protections on those. The systems that provide that front-facing like information and the low value, low danger information about days of voting, where to vote, all those kinds of things. Those are on a completely separate system than the ones that maintain rolls. I remember the second. The second thing is that one of the interesting things about North Carolina that's different from a lot of states is that those voter rolls, the registered voter rolls, were actually public records and easily accessible. So I think every state I know of, they're public records. Sometimes every state except North Carolina, you have to pay some sort of fee, kind of Freedom of Information Act, kind of hookup fee. North Carolina, they're just sitting out there. Well, you have to know where they are, but they're sitting out there. Anybody can download them. Everybody has access to them. And I know that the major parties look at those and try to find people that are registered that are not really.
So that sort of leads into the question of how do you maintain your list? That's one of the big issues. Is the voter list up to date? How do you do it?
Sure. We have biennial list maintenance to begin with. We never purge voter rolls. There's biennial list maintenance that is done every January and every July. And that is an NCOA, National Change of Address. And that is contact the post office has received or gotten throughout the year, throughout the 6 months, that says, this person, we're seeing this address. This person's using this address instead of this one. So that flags it in our system to where we're going to mail that voter card, say, okay, which one are you residing in? And then they can send that card back in to us. Additionally, I forgot my second thought. Second part.
How do you maintain it? I mean,
Yes.
We're getting up to an election, so how do we know that there aren't 1,000 people in Surrey County on the list that don't exist or they moved?
And again, recent, I think good law change was, we perform list maintenance weekly now in the way of felon lists, death reports, duplicates that used to be done monthly. It's now done weekly by all 100 counties. So again, in an attempt to get the voter rolls as clean and tidy as they can be. And of course, the voter challenge process is still in effect. If there's someone that either us as staff, I have filed a voter challenge since being in this role. If we see something, then we have to do something as well.
So how does the challenge work?
I was going to bring that point up, I'm glad our director did, but the great thing about our election system, the there are a lot of great things. There are so many things that could be improved upon, like anything else. But when it comes to a voter challenge, any citizen in the county can file a voter challenge within the framework of the law. If they know someone who is voting and using an address where they don't live, it's not their residence, the residence is empty, or whatever the circumstances may be, they can file a voter challenge, file it with our board of directors. It comes to the board, our chairman leads our quasi-judicial process for reviewing that voter challenge. And the person who has been challenged has the right to appear and explain their case. And the person who has filed it also has the right to come before the board and explain why they have filed that voter challenge. So I know within the last year, I've had a number of people ask me about how do we clean up our voter rolls, and that's usually the first thing I ask people to do, is if you know of someone that should not be voting because of their address or where they live, file a voter challenge. Don't keep complaining about it. Do something about it and bring it to the board. We are required by law to hear every voter challenge that comes before us. We can't deny that. We would want to. So it's one of those steps that every citizen needs to be aware of. Many are not, but we want them to be aware of it and exercise it where it's appropriate.
This is sort of in the list maintenance realm, but, and there's been a recent lawsuit filed, dealing with people on the roads who didn't, you'll have to explain it, but the driver's license and social security number information wasn't required, but they're now registered to vote. Explain that. And tell us how to resolve it.
Well, the state courts will have to resolve it, but, I believe it was a year ago, the state board was using a form, for registration that included driver's license and the last 4 digits of your social security number as optional information. There is there's a lawsuit filed arguing that that information should not have been optional, it should have been required. That is a question of law under the National Voter Registration Act, and the court may or may not have to decide whether that was true. The problem, the mistake, of course, if there was one, was with the Board of Elections. There's no, currently no indication that the people who used that form did anything wrong. They registered using the form that the state board gave to them. The lawsuit, there are 225,000 people who used that form before the state board changed the form, and it is now requiring the last 4 digits of the social security number or your driver's license number when you register. The majority of people who will vote this year have used forms that are not questionable in these terms. The lawsuit has asked for all 225,000 of those people to be removed from the voter rolls, which is actually illegal. That would violate the federal IFVRA. You cannot remove people systematically from the rolls within 90 days of an election. And so if any of those people were, happened to not be qualified for some other reason, they're subject to this challenge process. But of course, all of these people will also have to show voter ID when they show up to vote or when they send in their absentee ballot. That voter ID is very likely to be a driver's license. It's not that these people's identity will not be checked. That is now part of our system. It is a question of whether people who used this old form should be allowed to vote. My guess is a court will decide that federal law requires that they be allowed to vote and stay on the rolls. We'll see how that goes.
So would it be correct if if they're eligible, they just didn't have a form that required it, would there be any issue with them being allowed to vote? Simply
No,
because they
if
filled it out?
they're eligible to vote, whether the state was using the right form or not, doesn't impact your eligibility to vote. The problem was
Wording on the form, it was not required.
right, they followed the directions on the form, and the greatest likelihood is that, you know, the vast majority, if not all, 225,000 people were in fact eligible to vote, do live at the address they provided, and they will have to show that when they show up to cast their ballot.
Well, following federal HAVA is near and dear to our board's heart in many ways. We addressed this very topic back in November and December meetings of 2023. We had read information that the state was being accused of not following HAVA. And for the benefit of our audience, the Help America Vote Act was passed in 2002. So for 20 plus years, for various reasons, North Carolina was not following the federal HAVA requirements of driver's license or last 4 digits of social. And anytime that happens, it gives our citizens cause to question. And you know, it's tough enough to try to instill confidence in the elections process, for everybody to feel confident that it is safe and secure. But one little thing like that, and I don't mean little, but in its literal sense, it just is enough to cause people angst and doubt. And it's something we need to do a better job in trying to avoid, so that we don't generate all of this concern that really doesn't get us anywhere.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make more work for Shelley there, but do you have any estimate how many Surrey County residents fell within, you know, I mean, I guess they could be people who moved in, no way to tell.
We have not, we do not.
Right, so, I want to deal with provisional ballots, and then I want Stephen to give us how are we protected? It's election day, people have done all this. Explain what provisional ballots are and how they work and why we have them. Take that, and you want to take it, or Wayne?
I mean, from our board perspective, and our chairman doesn't behind him, but you know, provisionals work very similarly to absentee ballots in the sense that if a voter shows up, they don't have the right credentials at the time that they're voting, then our poll team will offer them a provisional ballot. And that provisional ballot then comes back to our director's office and our team. They review those provisional ballots, make sure they're in compliance, and then as a board, we are reviewing any and all provisional ballots. Another 5 sets of eyes, right now 4 sets of eyes, but hopefully 5 here very soon.
Yeah.
Set of 5 more eyes, people's eyes are looking at these provisional ballots to make sure that the voter has met all the legal requirements.
So if you vote a provisional during early voting, it's not run through the tabula, correctly?
No, not until after we approve it. And usually after we've approved it in the board meetings, then we witness and watch the ballot fit into the tabulator so that the ballot is counted.
And provisional is just a fail safe. We cannot turn anyone away from a precinct for any reason. If you are driving a truck, you're going from here to California, you come through Mount Airy and you see signs to vote and you want to vote, we cannot turn you away. So they would be, that person would be voting a provisional ballot. So it's a fail safe for any hiccup or issue on election day. Or if someone does not have their photo ID, then you are offered the exception form at voting a provisional ballot.
not to imply that we count that ballot from the truck driver that is registered out of state, even though he or she is requested to cast a ballot in Surrey County, because we can't count that ballot because they're not a citizen of Surrey County. But we, as our directors clearly explained, we can't determine the way.
And we do have a whole provisional checklist for each and every provisional ballot. And it's a very lengthy checklist. Was the voter registered? Did they attempt to register? Dates, were they in the incomplete queue? It goes on and on and on to where we can present this with each provisional ballot to the board, so they will see the research that's been done. And that's why the 10-day period from Canvas, that's what most boards of elections are doing in those 10 days, is provisional research. Getting that ready to present to the board at the supplemental absentee, we're not called it anymore, but can't get out of that habit, which is the night before Canvas for our board. So a lot of provisional research and time goes into each and every one of those.
So we get to certification here just a minute. It's election day, all the absentees are in, you check them, provisional ballots, you're checking them, people are casting their ballots. And we know that there are bad forces out there in the world and maybe even in the country that want to interfere or somehow impact our election system. Stephen, from a cybersecurity standpoint, what kind of protections do we have to either prevent it, or if somebody actually do something to catch it?
Sure. So most of what I look at in my day-to-day work is focused on the technology, the machines. But I think people should appreciate that security is a much bigger thing. It's about the people and the processes that go into protecting the ballot. 3 of the 4 people on my left have used the term checks and balances, and that's one of the most important things to understand about security. Is the technology helps us, but we don't count on it. We don't rely on it. We can run the elections and we can recount the elections without any technology involved whatsoever. Election equipment, voting equipment, goes through 3 levels of certification before it's actually brought into play for any election. They're analyzed and evaluated and certified by federal election labs. There's a Federal Elections Assistance Commission that sets guidelines, best practices for security of voting equipment. And when I say best practices, they don't mandate this. This is simply the experts got together and said this is how secure equipment should be designed and configured. So that's the federal. The state of North Carolina has to certify any piece of equipment that's used in the state. They start with only the things that are certified at the federal level, and then they narrow it down to that. The counties then each have some autonomy. They can select their own equipment from a list of equipment that's certified by the state. There are 3 certified vendors in the state. Almost all counties use one particular vendor. I think there's one that nobody uses.
We're not even safe.
No. But I think, and I've been to a lot of different counties, and so I don't track exactly what people use, but I'm almost always safe to say they use the ES&S equipment, the DS200 ballot tabulator.
Express vote.
There you go. And so when the county selects and they receive the equipment, there's something called a compliance check where they verify that the delivered equipment was exactly the same versions of software and everything that was certified by the state and federal government. Before each election, you mentioned LNA testing, there's logic and accuracy testing that checks the configuration for that particular election. They make sure that it's configured so that it's counting the right people with the right ballot spots. Every vote in the state of North Carolina is counted off of a paper ballot. Every single vote, except military overseas in some cases.
Right, because they can be emailed, yeah.
But everybody else, you go in, you see the equipment, and 1 of 2 things happens. In 93 out of 100 counties in North Carolina, people do hand mark the ballot as the standard procedure, and then they feed that, their own hand marked ballot into the tab. Every county also has things called ballot marking device, that for people that need it for ADA compliance, they can use a touchscreen to vote. Some of them have an audio interface, to select your candidates. But the result of that, that's an isolated machine, it's not connected to anything. It prints a paper ballot for the person that they can feed. So every vote comes from a piece of paper. It's all human readable, people look at it and see what their vote is when they feed it into that. And
Is there anything connected to the internet that could impact?
so one of the things that's nice about North Carolina, the federal standards that I mentioned, the best practices, they go through various revisions. They revised their standards about a year ago to add 2 new requirements. They hadn't done it in probably 10 years. The 2 new requirements were every vote is counted from a paper ballot, and no voting equipment can have any kind of communication hardware in it on. No modems, no networking, no wireless wire, nothing. It can't communicate with anything. That's the new regulations. North Carolina had in the North Carolina Code and North Carolina law years ago, those exact 2 same restrictions. So by law, none of the equipment we have can communicate with the internet, so no hacker can get in from the internet. They're isolated systems. They print the results at the end on pieces of paper, tapes that are signed off, and then those are handed in. So there is an electronic reporting step from the county to the state. But all of the tabulation, the combining of the precincts, all those happen on disconnected systems.
And I want to add one other question about safeguards, the audit process. Could you explain what that is and how that works? Make sure the machines are operating correctly.
Yes, again, I think that goes back to the LNA testing, that is done with each, DS200 and for us Express Vote. We test both of those. And in that testing, of course, ballots are ran every way, upside down, backwards. We have overvotes, undervotes, and then we have a test deck that we compare that to make sure that the machine is calibrated correctly. We even check for the date is correct, the time is correct. You know, that time step is very important on your tapes for election morning and for election night. It has to be noted at one time.
So after the election.
The
Yeah.
random precincts.
And the audit, and that's what's great about the paper ballot. We can do the sample, hand-to-eye audit that is randomly selected by the state board, 2 precincts for each county. We don't know what those precincts are going to be. We always pray it's not early voting site. Sometimes we get an early voting site. But yes, absolutely, that's the beauty of the paper ballot. We have that paper trail that you can always audit. You know, Surrey County had to do a full election recount in March of 2020. And every single ballot was accounted for and ran through, well, it was a high-speed scanner, a DS400. But yeah, that's the beauty of the paper ballot is you can do that audit process or a full recount if needed.
I'm going to jump to certification. So the votes are in, they've been tabulated. There's a process called certification. Wayne, you want to explain that from the board's perspective, how that works, what the requirement is?
That is one of the larger requirements of the county board of elections, and that is taking the information from each precinct for each candidate or issue that was voted on, that the checks and balances come up, that all of the ballots that have been cast, you have a certain amount that have been undervoted, overvoted. That means that this person filled out only the presidential and skipped the rest of the ballot. It would show that as far as the undervotes of the different places, but those precincts, the total for all of the candidates and all of the issues, if there's issues to be voted on, that tallies up. It's a check and balance of the accounting of the votes and what is shown, and then we bring that through the audit to the bottom line, and the county board of elections has to certify that number of votes and what the outcome has been for what is sent to Rob. So all 100 counties in what's called the canvas has to do the certification. And that's standard by law, that we have to look at that and come to the code. One thing I want to back up on the provisional ballots, if I may.
Sure.
There's, Michelle had said, no one is turned away coming into a precinct that wishes to vote. Even they might not have the right credentials to show, they might not have a photo ID, they have the time to be able to come into the board election afterwards to show their photo ID, so that provisional ballot can be counted on election day. If a person comes into a precinct and they are not registered in that precinct, they can vote a provisional ballot, but now that provisional ballot by law will not be counted. So that is and here you are, you're saying, well, here's a provisional ballot, you're out of precinct. You're supposed to be voting in Franklin Township precinct, and you're in Elton. And you have, I can't get there in time. You have to vote in the precinct that you're registered. Even through the provisional ballot method, on the day of election, the primary, it will not count.
Even the statewide races that are not impacted. So it's a void.
Am I correct?
If
Statewide races might count, but I might look at Ann, that's one we'll have to look
In
at.
certain circumstances.
And two, if I may
Sure,
comment just very briefly, for our citizens' concerns, that this process takes place in a partisan environment. When it comes to the audit, it is always bipartisan. At least one Democrat, one Republican, working together as a team, looking at the data, looking at the numbers, and coming to a mutual conclusion that the numbers are what, the tabulators show, the tapes show, and everything is matched.
And we also have a bipartisan team of board members watching the bipartisan team of precinct officials doing the audit. So we safeguards.
Yes.
So we've got about 15 minutes. Any audience questions for, we've been to a couple of college campuses. The students ask a lot of questions, so but, right, well, yes, sir, yeah. Jeff.
Just one final question. When it comes to the canvas and the certification of the election, does it have to be a full unanimous decision by the Board of Elections? Because we had this issue a couple years ago. And two of the board members were removed by the state. So does that have to be unanimous?
That particular instance, we had a majority, it was a 4-1. And in that particular time, I can't speak for now, but that particular time, then the results were certified because it was the majority.
So it still doesn't have to be.
That's right.
And
So would it be correct, though, that if there's really no question, staff says, here's the vote totals, and the board doesn't have any questions, and are they obligated by law to certify, or?
They are, and I think that mentioned earlier, I was a UNC grad, I will use a basketball analogy. I think the process that these folks have talked about leading up to election, where they're looking at absentee ballots, where they are looking at provisional ballots, they're acting like referees, in deciding, did that basket go in?
Yeah.
Did that shot go in, or did it not? Are we gonna count it or are we not? But once we get the certification, they're scorekeepers. They're just telling you, what the final score was. They're collecting the final score from this precinct and from this precinct and from this precinct. And they're looking to see, does it all add up? But it's about math. It's about the decisions that have already been made. The decision to certify an election is a ministerial one. And in fact, if a board member, which, I have no reason to think that would be the case here, doesn't comply with that ministerial duty, they might be removed, and in some circumstances, there could be even greater consequences.
And Joe, to your question. Again, our board is required under sworn oath to God, Constitution, state constitution, and all federal and state election laws to follow those laws in the certification process. Now, it's not a question of whether you agree with all the laws or not. I'll admit, I have some questions. I think they could go even further, but to make everybody feel better about the process. But nonetheless, we have the laws that are on the books. We follow those laws, and there's no legal reason at that point for us not to certify if all the numbers make sense. And there will be people that may not agree with that process. That's great. Take it to our legislatures and let the voice be known to do something different. So
The canvas, when it comes down to canvas day in the county, it's like 5 accountants or auditors getting together in open, looking at the results, looking at the final tally, looking at the audited results, making the audit, and agreeing on it, and saying we all agree with what the final votes show. And so
And
there's a final audit.
there's reports that we do each absentee meeting. We have to make sure that if we present the board 25 ballots, then our report better have the names of those 25 voters. That's throughout the process, so that will begin Friday. And then throughout, all the way up until the end, there is a report for that meeting, pre-canvass meeting. Again, where we're checking all the tapes, we're checking all the research for the provisionals, everything has to add up. And even so much, when we do our LNA testing, we have a master seal log that is carried throughout the election. So that seal log, where the DS200s and express votes are sealed from testing, that is then written down on election morning by that chief judge, and then our board compares, okay, that seal was the same when it left as when the chief judge in Salon precinct wrote that same number down. So it's constantly checking, so we know no one has opened a machine or tampered with the machine that would stand out if that was the case, if those numbers were different.
So, just a couple more questions here. So, election night at 7:32, the news has 2 precincts reporting, and they're announcing the likely winners in the race. And we all want to know who won, right? So, when is the winner determined? Canvas,
It will be,
state board?
it will be November the 15th, 2024, by the state board.
within 2 weeks after.
Well, no, we're counting states 2 weeks after that. So-
Right before Thanksgiving, yeah, right before
Right.
Thanksgiving, some turkey.
Yeah. And if I can too, I would like to mention that Surrey County has a few additional safeguards with the returns. We do have the chief judge brings, the voted ballots back after we have a runner, election-like runner, who immediately leaves that precinct with the USB and the tapes. That way, if something, God forbid, happened to that runner, We did not get the stick or the tapes. We have those ballots that can be hand counted separate. 2 different drivers leaving at 2 different times. And also in the ballot box for the last election. And I should let Dwayne talk about this, because you're the master of the iPad on election.
But you came up with the idea.
Tell them about your job
You know, so,
on election night, what we've done in Surrey for all 23 precincts.
For security, to be able to keep up with each ballot box at the end, 7:30, when the polls close. That ballot box, we're able to maintain constant information on where it goes. When it leaves the polling place, the precinct, the route that they take, and how long it takes to get to Dobson, to offload those ballot boxes. And so that is maintained. We know where that ballot box is when it leaves with the chief judge and the route that they take. If there's an accident, that ballot box stops on the iPad.
And to take the chairman's comments to clarify, our director came up with a suggestion of using an AirTag, and just like you would use in your luggage as you travel. And it is the AirTag technology that is inside every ballot box that enables us to track and trace. And I'm not aware of any other county doing that. So kudos to our county team and our board for wanting to take the extra step so that we can honestly tell our citizens that this is what we're doing to ensure that the chain of custody is being maintained. And
That is being watched in live real time.
Yeah.
And our commissioners for funding it.
Yes.
Yes, well, look,
and we appreciate our commitment.
you teed up one of the last 2 questions. Who funds the Surrey County Board of Elections? And here's a chance to say, you need more staffing, you need more, and I would make a note, the North Carolina State Campaign Finance software that handles all the hundreds of millions of dollars in campaign funds and reports is 20 years old. So technology, keeping up with technology is a critical component. So you can either make a plug for additional funding or clap your hands for the.
No, honestly, in Surrey County, we are very fortunate, and I'm not just saying that because the county commissioner is sitting in the room, but truthfully, we've had a lot of challenges in 5 years. I say 5 years because I've been there since late 2019. But one of the challenges we have not had is if we request funding. Now, am I going to go to the commissioners meeting and get asked quite a few questions? Absolutely. But I honor that. I like that. I think that just helps the community and the voters know that we take it seriously. The commissioners take that funding seriously. But we have been very fortunate that they have granted many security improvements in the past 2 to 4 years. Some with COVID money in 2020, but many extras that were done in 2023 that were some unconventional for boards of elections offices, but nonetheless, our county supported that and made many security improvements since 2022 that we are very fortunate.
And the whole goal was to, again, encourage our citizens to understand that we are making some decisions, certainly with the support of our county board of commissioners, to provide a safe environment for them to vote, that they have no concerns. One, as an example, was to install concrete ballast in front of our main elections headquarters. It was very reachable and, not vehicle or any type of vehicle could come driving straight in if that was what somebody wished to do. We just wanted to put in place some common sense, practical security measures that would make our citizens feel very comfortable and confident of coming to the polls. So,
Yeah, that's encouraging to hear. Not every county is as fortunate as you are. One last question, then I'm gonna give each of you 30 seconds to just say whatever you'd like to say to your fellow citizens here. Transparency. What's the opportunity for people to come actually see all of the things we've been talking
Just get in your car and come to Dawson. We would love to see, a room full, we'd love to see 2 people. We just encourage everyone to come. Every single process that we have mentioned tonight on this stage is 100% viewable to the public. Everything. It's, you know, transparent. I think the word is overused, but, it is truly transparent, everything we do. So please, we encourage you to come check it out, you know, yourself. And if you really want to know, be a poll worker.
about. Yeah, there you go. You have enough, or do you still look at yourself?
Always need more.
Always
We need more for
okay,
election.
recruiting pitch. All right, last 30 seconds, give or take. Stephen, I'll start with you. What do you want to leave with, folks?
I think the main thing I've observed over the past year I've been working with the different election groups is I've met with a lot of people in different counties. I'm in Guilford County, like our elections director. These are very dedicated people. They all have partisan leanings, but they all agree that what they want are safe and secure elections. They want your vote to count. They only want legal votes to count. And that's what everybody believes. There's from the technology standpoint, everything is very well thought out, checks and balances everywhere with people.
Ian?
I will echo similar themes. I work at an organization called Protect Democracy, and there is no more fundamental component of our democracy than the right of all eligible voters to participate in elections and to see those votes counted accurately and have the candidates who got the most votes take office. And you know, there are a number of safeguards that we've talked about here. It is hard work applying all of them. And so, you know, these folks are doing democracy work and we should be really grateful for them. If you think there are more security features that we should add, if you think some of them are too strenuous, take it up with the legislature. It is not these folks' job to change the law. It is their job to implement it, and they do it heroically.
Chairman?
In nearly 10 years serving Surrey County on the Board of Elections, there's been many changes. I have been on a board where there were only 3 members. And it was under a Republican governor, so it was a 2-to-1. 2 Republicans, 1 Democrat. Here I am. It was just me. And so the board has made different changes in makeup. There's been so many changes in our law. And I would say for the most part, it's all been good. I foresee as more changes that I hope will be good and carried out through the legislature and then firm through the courts. Seems like everything has to go eventually to the court system. But one big thing in the primaries, in the elections, that staff, especially with the Board of Elections and the board members, that we appreciate and have to have, and that's understanding family. Because in primary and election time, hours are long. Home seems like far away. We're working on provisional ballots and vetting the information. You have to have good family.
Jimmy?
People that know me know that I cannot even say hello in 30 seconds. I'll do the best I can. It's been an honor to serve citizens of Surrey County for the past year and a half. I look forward to fulfilling the term. God willing, maybe I get to return. But at the same time, we do have a very diverse board in many of our beliefs, but we do check that at the door because the focus is what does the law say and how do we apply the law and make the best decisions we can. And with that, I'm confident that this board does that. I have talked with members of other boards at our state conferences, and to be quite honest, I feel even better about our board when I hear some of the things that they're not doing and should be doing, and just the simple lack of knowledge about the law. So, not to brag on us, but I'm bragging on us a little bit, just the fact that I have something to compare with. Steve mentioned our federal elections committee, and I wanted to touch on that very quickly. From that same committee, that committee classified our elections as critical infrastructure. And when that happens, that puts an onus on the process to constantly work on continuous improvement. From a business standpoint, critical infrastructure, whether it's a process or a tangible item, you are applying continuous improvement to the process. You are also making every step to eliminate risks that harm the critical infrastructure. And so from that standpoint, as I said earlier, the laws are the laws, and we have to abide by them and we apply them. And my colleagues know that I feel pretty strongly about the laws should be stricter, particularly when it comes to proof of verifying citizenship, because we don't do that in the state. Not calling out anybody, it's just a fact. We do not verify. It's asking the person to attest that they're a citizen or not a citizen, and quite frankly, that is blind trust. In business, I wouldn't allow that to happen in our organization at all. Blind trust. Verification is part of the process. So I'm hopeful, as our chairman mentioned, that we've come a long way. We've got a lot of laws that are in place that needed to be in place. It's improved security and safety. But I think the bigger question is what more can we do to make it more secure and more safe?
Thank you. And you get the last word, Madam Director.
I just want to remind everyone of important dates coming up. The 11th of October is the voter registration deadline by 5 o'clock. So if you've not registered to vote, or you know someone who has not and they want to participate in the general election, they miss that deadline, then they'll need to register and vote at an early voting site. And then, of course, election day is November 5th. Polls open at 6:30 a.m. until 7:30 p.m. Absentee ballots are due by 7:30 p.m. on election day. So that's my vote.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it.
Jennifer's going to close things, but let's give this crowd.
Give our moderator a big hand.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. One of the most important things you can do is tell your friends and neighbors what you learned tonight. I know I learned at least one or two new things, and I've been to like 20 at least town halls. So, please do spread the word. That's your homework. The other homework is we have an evaluation form on the back next to the snacks. You can take a snack while you fill out your evaluation form. But we want to make sure that we are doing, meeting the needs of the communities. If we could do something better, something you learned. Did you find this to be helpful or not? Please do fill that out before you go. And then we also are going to have a virtual town hall October the 15th. And we're also going to put the one in Charlotte was filmed. We'll put that up on our website as well. So if you have folks who couldn't make it, tell them there's a virtual one coming up. They can actually ask questions in the chat. But there is one that's already been filmed as well. And I have a thank you for our panelists. We got to have a little fun with this tour. So a friend of mine is an artist, drew a picture of a Volkswagen bus, like the tour bus, with me and Bob sticking our heads out. And this is what it looks like. And each of you are gonna get one of these. Tour, right? We have all the city stops on there. So, there you are, right there, Mount Airy. There you are. So everybody's gonna get one, so don't leave without yours. And, thank you all for coming. Don't forget to fill out the evaluation. And
We have flyers outside,
the flyers, that's
sample
right.
ballots, early voting posters, everything.
Super. All right. Thanks again, everybody.